everyone, so today is my birthday and that's why my hair looks, all curled and actually done. And then I also have eyeliner on, which I never put eyeliner on except for usually for my birthday. So I am totally done up for my birthday. We're not actually really doing anything, but I figured that I would just get ready and look nice. And yeah. So with most of my videos, actually a lot of my videos, I did a Twitter poll asking if you guys would actually be interested in hearing about why I like to read YA. And for the most part, I think about 90-something% of you guys said yes. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And I have a lot to talk about on this subject. I've been reading YA since I was about 8 years old. So I'm 23 now. And I started reading it when I was 8. So that is, doing some quick math, 15 years. I've been reading YA for 15 years. That is the majority of my life. And so I was reading it before the age group actually starts, and then I'm now reading it after the age group ends. So it's been a very, very long time of me reading young adult or teen fiction. For me, I really love YA. I'm not really sure what it is exactly about YA that I really like. I think it's just the way that stories are told in this sort of age group. I have tried older novels like from adult or new adult, and for the most part I don't really like those. I don't know what it is. I can't exactly explain why I like the writing style of YA. I think it's just more accessible. I think it's honestly, for me, better written. And I just really love the adventure and the passion and the humanity that's in YA that I feel is left out in adult fiction. For me, adult fiction is so dry and humorless and just so serious, and I'm like not a serious person at all. I don't want serious content. I'm not here to hear about middle-aged bullshit. I really don't care. I don't care about middle-aged problems. I don't care about 30-year-old problems. I don't care about even really 20-year-old problems. I really don't. It's also dry and boring and adulting, and even like the adult novels that are like sci-fi or fantasy, I just can't connect to them in the way that I can connect to a YA novel. Like, I recently read Bloodline by Claudia Gray, and she's a YA author, and Star Wars is one of my favorite things ever, and I love sci-fi, I love fantasy, but still Bloodline was so different for me compared to Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which is written by Claudia Gray, but it's actually YA. So, Bloodline being adult, Leia, Princess of Alderaan being YA, it's so different for me. I don't know why it took me so much longer to actually read Bloodline than it did Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And I think that's kind of a good comparison because I did like Bloodline. It was a book that I actually really enjoyed, and I love Claudia Gray's writing, but at the same time, it's like there's something about Bloodline that I just didn't connect to. Like, I just couldn't really connect with all of like the political drama and like the older drama, like between people that are older than me or whatever. And so maybe that is still just an age thing, but I really love YA. I loved it even before I was a teenager, and I don't know, there's just something about it that is so much more magical to me than adult fiction. Also, another reason that I read YA is I write it. I've been writing young adult fiction forever, for like my entire life. Ever since I started writing, I've just written for teenagers and with teenage characters, even when I wasn't a teenager. And so I feel like if you're going to write YA, you might as well read YA, because I don't really understand the YA authors who don't read YA. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you're writing for teenagers, shouldn't you be reading the books that are in the age group that you're writing for? Like, that just makes sense to me. I just don't understand how someone wants to write young adult fiction but won't read young adult fiction. Like, they just mainly read adult fiction. So I'm just kind of like, I feel like there's a little bit of disconnect there. I feel like you're kind of like distancing yourself away from teenagers, but you also want to profit off of them, which seems strange to me. And I really love teenagers. I think that they're awesome, and I think that they're so spirited and creative and awesome. So I can't really imagine myself wanting to write young adult fiction, but then also not reading young adult fiction. And also for me, being a marginalized person, being bisexual, being Latinx, you know, all of this stuff, I feel like when I was a teenager, all we had was like the Hunger Games and Gossip Girl. That was about it. That was all we had. You know, I didn't really have the access to diverse literature, especially not diverse young adult literature. That just wasn't a thing when I was a teenager. And you know, I was a teenager in like 2010, 2009, 2011. Like I was like a teenager from basically, I don't know, how old am I? 2008 to, I am so bad at math. I was a teenager from 2008 until, I want to say 2014. Yeah, okay, 2008 to 2014, I was a teenager. And for the most part, I didn't have access to diverse novels. I didn't have access to a bisexual main character or a Latinx main character. And if I did have these bisexual or Latinx characters in the books that I was reading, they were extremely stereotyped. They weren't people that I could relate to. You know, I still remember the book Catwalk, I think it was called, by Deborah Gregory, I want to say. She's the one that wrote the Cheetah Girls. And I remember there being a Latinx character in that book, and he was the biggest stereotype I have ever seen in any book ever. Like, it was, I still remember how he talked. It was so like with this like attitude and like Spanglish, and like he was always like, you know, snapping his fingers, and like I was just like, oh my god, like I remember reading that, I'm like, I can't believe that this is an actual character. Like, I can't believe that that's what she thinks that we're like, because he was the only one in that book. And I was just like, oh my god, it was like, I have never seen something like a Latinx character be more stereotyped than that. Like, that is it. Like, that is, I was, oh my gosh. But now it's so nice because I kind of get to, you know, give my teenage self that representation that she didn't get when, you know, back in the day when I was 16 and trying to find books that were about me, for me, and they just weren't there. They weren't there for me to have. And like when I was a teenager, my library was very, very like low on new books or really any books at all. We had one shelf, you know, so it's kind of funny, you know, looking back at like the library as when I was a teenager, having like one shelf, and now that I'm 23 years old, I have like, the library has like shelves, like it's a whole huge section of the library that's young adult, and it's like, wow, I wish I would have had this when I was a teenager. And I feel that a lot. You know, when I read Labyrinth Lost by Zareta Cordova, I was like, throughout the entire thing, I was like, I wish I had this as a teenager. I would have loved to have this as a teenager, and I feel like it would have helped my self-esteem so much more, because when I was a teenager, I was in the closet. I was very insecure and embarrassed about being Latinx. I didn't like it. You know, there was a lot of issues with internalized racism, and I feel like if I had I'm getting like emotional. I feel like if I had had Labyrinth Lost as a teenager, it would have been so much better. So I love Labyrinth Lost. It's one of my favorite books ever. I always get a little emotional when I talk about this, so I'm fine. But yeah, I feel like when you're a marginalized teen or a marginalized person in general, you know, and you don't have that, you know, access to diverse literature, especially diverse literature that represents yourself, you know, you feel kind of alone. So I felt like that a lot as a teenager, and I write young adult fiction because I don't want other people to feel like that as well. So that's kind of the reason why I read it and why I write it and why it's so important to me as even a 23-year-old adult person. I mean, for myself, I'm not really as adult as a lot of teenagers think that I am, or think that people at 23 are. You know, there are definitely a lot of different types of people. There's some people at 23 that have their own house, have their own apartment, who pay their bills, pay their rent, do all this stuff, have a full-time job, and that's great. That's amazing, but that's not me. I don't have a full-time job. I have a part-time job on the internet. I make YouTube videos. I go to school. I live at my parents' house. You know, I don't pay, you know, bills or whatever. You know, so for the most part, there's not too much different except for I can drink alcohol legally. And so sometimes I do feel like I still am kind of part of that YA thing, even though I know I'm not, and I would like to use, you know, my adult platform to help other teenagers who, you know, feel kind of bogged down by all the adults in the young adult community. So yeah, I hope that that kind of explains why I love YA fiction, why I write it, why I read it. Sorry for getting a little bit emotional in the middle of there. Like, that was not something I was expecting or planning, but I just get really emotional when I talk about this kind of stuff because it means a lot to me. And, you know, I'm so thankful to have this entire, you know, community of people behind me and supporting me, and so I can support them. And yeah, I love this community so much, and it means a lot to me, so thank you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!